call the meeting to order at 6:15. This is the Common Council on July 19th. I apologize for our late start due to technical difficulties, but they have been resolved. Our roll call has been taken. All alderpersons are present in the chamber. We are missing some other staff and city attorney this evening, so if there are some issues, we'll have to follow up with them tomorrow, or if anybody has any questions. Unfortunately, I'll have to wait for tomorrow. Next item is Pledge of Allegiance and silent prayer in lieu of invocation. Please stand. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen. Okay, we are on to item 4, which is the reading of the minutes of the previous meeting held on June 21st. What are your wishes? Second by Benjamin. So a motion is second to approve the report. Is there any discussion, questions, comments? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. Yeah, that motion carried 8 ayes, 0 nays. We are on to consider resolution acknowledging the filing of an annual report in compliance with annual meeting requirements. Whose item was that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, from the Joint Review Board. Second by Benjamin. Any discussions? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion carried 8 ayes, 0 nays. Item 6 is consider for confirmation of Mayor Blazer's appointment to the Plan Commission. That should be attachment 3. I have a motion by Austin, second by Bemke. Any discussion? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion carried 8 ayes, 0 nays. We're on to consider for action or adoption and action of the Plan Commission meeting, which was held on July 7th. Kyle.
Thank you, Mayor. The Plan Commission met at 4 p.m. on July 7th in the council chambers. A quorum was present and a list of attendees is in our office, Community Development Clerk's Department. The meeting was called to order at 4 p.m. The first item for action was approval of the reports from the June 6, 2022 Plan Commission meeting and the June 1st public meeting. Motion by Dobbin to approve the reports, second by Goodrow. The motion carried 6-0. The second item was Vanderwall and Associates. Director Kearns provided an update and identified that a planning symposium will be held on July 21st. All of the elders have been emailed with regards to that. Additionally, he summarized the recovery and redevelopment plan up to this point and noted that the project would be completed by late summer, early fall. No action was taken. Item number 3 was a extraterritorial CSM request from Dan Inc. To approve the creation of 3 lots which were under 5 acres in the town of Saratoga. Director Kern summarized the item, recommending approval. Motion by Goodrow to approve the request for the 3 lots. It was seconded by Austin. Motion carried 6-0. Item number 4 was a request from RC West for a certified survey map to combine 2 lots at 1810 Spencer Street and dedicate right-of-way on 18th Avenue South. Director Kearns summarized the request recommending approval. A motion was made by Commissioner Doven and seconded by Goodrow to approve item 4, the lot combination and the street dedication. Or I'm sorry, the dedication of right-of-way on 18th Avenue South. That motion carried 6-0. Item 5 was a review of the tourist rooming house definition, supplemental standards, and conditional use permit process within the City of Wisconsin Rapids zoning code. Director Kearns summarized the item and noted that this was prompted by the City Council and recommended that the current requirement for a conditional use permit stay. And Commissioner Goodrow asked for clarification about a 6-month review and other conditions that could be placed upon tourist rooming houses, to which Director Kearns responded. Commissioner Feith asked for clarification about the review and the transfer of ownership rather than the conditional use permits running with the land, to which Director Kearns responded. Commissioner Austin reiterated the importance of conditional use permits, and it was generally accepted that no changes would occur or be recommended. No action was taken. Item number 6 was a request from Donald Garrison for a conditional use permit to operate a tourist rooming house at 465 Shady Lane. Director Kearns provided a summary of the report, as well as Associate Planner Edmondson. There was a motion by Goodrow to approve the request for a conditional use permit to operate a tourist rooming house at 465 Shady Lane, subject to 10 conditions, 2 of which were added at the meeting. I do want to clarify those 2. The first is that the transfer of property ownership shall require a review of the conditional use permit by the Plan Commission and Common Council prior to the operation of the use under new ownership. And number 2 was the current owner and operator of the use shall notify the city in writing prior to the transfer of ownership. Again, there are 8 other conditions that are identified in the staff report. There was a second by Austin. That motion carried 6-0. Item 7 was a request from Rita Wheeler, public hearing and action on a request for a conditional use permit to operate a tourist rooming house at 351 Madison Street. Associate Planner Edmondson provided a summary and recommended approval. Commissioner Austin inquired about the necessity of having a conditional use permit owner occupied for the property, and Director Kearns provided a response. Public hearing opened at 4:41 p.m. No one spoke in favor or against the request. That public hearing closed at 4:41 p.m. There was a motion by Goodrow to approve the request, subject to the following conditions, which are very similar to the previous item, with the addition of the 2 conditions for the previous item as well. There was a second by Doven. That motion carried 5-0 with Commissioner Feith abstaining. Item number 8 was a request from Marshfield Clinic Health System for a sign exception to increase the maximum number and maximum height of ground signs at 440 24th Street South. Associate Planner Edmondson provided a summary of the request and recommended approval. There was a motion by Blazer to approve the request for the sign exception and a second by Goodrow. That motion carried 6-0. Item 9 was a request from Chad Worrell for site plan review to construct a building addition at 850 Rosecrans Street. Again, staff provided a summary of the request, recommending approval with conditions. There was a motion by Blazer to approve the request for site plan review to construct a building addition at 850 Rosecrans, subject to 8 conditions. There was a second by Doven. That motion carried 6-0. Item number 10 was a request from the City of Wisconsin Rapids in a public hearing to amend the official street map of the City of Wisconsin Rapids. Director Kearns provided a summary of that request, noting that the official street map had not been amended since 2009, and there were several amendments that were necessary. A public hearing opened at 4:54. No one spoke in favor or against. The public hearing closed at 4:54. Commissioners questioned the The trail on East Jackson Street, to which Joe Eichstead clarified. Commissioner Gaudreau asked for further clarification about safety, again, to which City Engineer Eichstead elaborated. There was a motion by Austin to approve the official street map amendments as proposed, second by Tao. That motion carried 6-0. Item number 11 was a public hearing to amend, was a request by the City of Wisconsin Rapids and public hearing to amend Chapter 11 of the zoning ordinance specifically regarding maximum building coverage for principal and accessory structures on lots in residential districts. City staff summarized the request, recommending approval of the removal of rear lot coverage requirements. There was some conversation amongst the commission. Public hearing was opened at 5:13 p.m. No one spoke in favor or against. Public hearing closed then at 5:13 p.m. There was a motion by Davin to approve the amendment specifically regarding maximum building coverage of principal and accessory structures on lots in residential districts, and a second by Gaudreau. That motion carried 6-0. Item number 12 was a request by the City of Wisconsin Rapids and a public hearing for an amendment to Chapter 11, specifically to allow temporary residential shelters as a permitted or conditional use within other residential or commercial districts. Director Kearns provided a summary of the request. There was a public hearing that opened at 5:18. No one spoke in favor or against. That public hearing closed at 5:19. Commissioner Feith asked for clarification about the permitted or conditional use, to which Director Kearns replied. There was a motion by Gaudreau to approve the request, specifically to allow temporary residential shelters as a conditional use within the B1 district, the B2 general commercial district, and the R3 multifamily medium density district. Second by Blazer. That motion carried 6-0. Item 13 was adjournment. There was a motion by Davin to adjourn, seconded by Gaudreau. That motion carried 6-0. And the meeting adjourned at 5:53 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Any items need to be held out? Patrick?
5, 6, and 7.
5, 6, and 7. Any other items? So we have a motion by Austin, second by Veneman, to adopt the balance of the report. Okay. Did you have any items, Tom? Go ahead.
Just a question on number 8, Kyle. Could you explain a little bit more about the sign exemption or whatever? Wanting to go with 3 there at the at the clinic there.
Sure. So that request was for an additional freestanding sign. So right now, there are 2 freestanding signs on the property, 2 of which are receiving face changes or upgrades to their text. And then there was a 3rd sign that was proposed. Right now, the sign code only allows 1 freestanding sign. However, given the size of the property, given the use, given the secondary building that's being constructed, and I think the increased necessity to direct patrons on site with the hospital facility and the clinic facility, as well as the 4 frontages that exist on the property, staff felt as though a sign exception for that 3rd freestanding sign was warranted and recommended for approval.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please cast your ballot on the balance of the report. That motion carried 8 ayes, 0 nays. Congratulations. Time to sneak out. Okay, so we can move on to Patrick. Do we need to do the individual or just take 5 first, or?
Sure.
So since Patrick held out those items, Sherry, do you mind if he goes first? Okay, sounds good.
We'll probably overlap on a lot of what we say anyway, so. So the tourist rooming houses are already regulated by Wood County Department of Health as well as the State of Wisconsin Department of Agricultural Trade and Consumer Protection. And what does this regulation mean? It means that they are already inspecting it. They've got a set of rules as to how to operate it. And our additional conditions that we're putting on these are repetitive from what they already have. I think that's something that is already county regulated and or state regulated. I don't think that there should be additional regulations put on it, especially with a conditional use permit, where you're going to all the neighbors and letting them know what so-and-so wants to do with their house and getting the neighborhood all riled up because of something that somebody that is a property owner wants to do with their house. I'm very much for property owners' rights and letting them do what they want to do, but even with this, it's regulated, very heavily regulated already. They have a lot of fees that they have to pay to get the licenses, and additional fees and regulations by the city I don't think are warranted.
Thank you. Sherry?
Thank you. Excuse me. I just had a couple questions for Kyle. I agree with Mr. Delaney that they should be able to do with their property as long as there are conditions. However, I do feel that the conditional use permit should be regulated by the city. We have the authority to pull it or review it as necessary according to the conditions. But a couple questions I did have. I watched the meeting, and I don't know if I missed it or not. Number 6. No more than 6 guests shall be permitted at any given time. And I do believe that was because he is not on site. And I did some research with different municipalities in the state, if they are there on property or if they are not on property. It affected the number of people that were allowed. But I was just kind of confused as to why it's 6 for number 6, and then for number 7 for Rita Weiler, why it says only not more than 2 guests total shall be permitted at a given time. And I was just confused as to why, if we're doing conditional use permits, I mean, I know they're per property, but I thought maybe it'd be more uniform. So I was just confused as to why hers would only be 2 guests where the other one is 6. Thank you.
Do you want me to answer that? Okay. So I think there's a couple of reasons. In our current code, under tourist rooming house, under the definition, we require 1 parking space per each guest room. And so I think with Rita Wheeler's, I don't necessarily know if they have additional parking spaces or want to provide those additional parking spaces for additional guests or occupants. Under building code as well, there are certain requirements. I believe it's 120 square feet per bedroom to have legally have 2 occupants within the room. So I think the first one was a 3-bedroom, I believe. So with 2 occupants per room, again, and looking at the parking ratios, that's appropriately what fit the site.
Thank you. And then I have another question. Unless I'm missing this, but I don't see where it relates to, it doesn't say anywhere in the conditions of the 30 days maximum. I don't see it listed, unless I'm missing it on either of them, because I would want that added in there.
So a majority of the conditions that have been placed on them are actually the supplemental standards that are already required within the zoning ordinance. We just put them in the conditional use permit as conditions so that when we provide the decision document that the applicant signs, it's clear that they have to follow these conditions and supplemental standards. The definition of transient is not a supplemental standard. However, we do define it, the state defines it as being less than 30 days. If you want to add that as a condition to state that only transients shall be, or this tourist rooming house shall only be permitted for transient stays, we can certainly do that.
I wouldn't want to hold this up by doing that, but as long as they're aware that, I mean, if it's already in there, I mean, I know with the state debt cap, I believe it's in that as well, correct? Or-
Right, so without it being a condition, we still have the authority to enforce that section of the ordinance. Because it's ordinance, because it's defined both in statute and our local ordinance. If we get a call that says somebody's staying in this for a 3-month period and we can prove that, we can follow up with an order or citations, zoning violation citations to address it, without it being a condition of approval.
Thank you.
Matt?
So my understanding is when we sent this back, we were wondering if this is a conditional use permit or this should be just like a registration type situation. So when we sent it back to the commission, they said we want to keep it, they wanted to keep it as a conditional use permit. Is that kind of how that came around?
Right, so at the Plan Commission, we analyzed both the conditional use and the recent state statutes under Wisconsin Act 67. We also provided some examples of what surrounding communities do to regulate tourist rooming houses. And based on those and additional discussion and conversation at the Plan Commission, it was determined to maintain the existing ordinance as it's written and to act on the existing applications, but add the additional conditions regarding notification to the city if ownership changes, and so notification in writing, and then that it be reviewed at the time or before the ownership change.
Okay, so are we, like, as a city, are we looking at these as Airbnbs or verbals, or are we looking at these as, I know we're calling them, what is it, tourist, transient, we have all these different names for it, but specific, so we're not looking at these as specifically as Airbnb businesses. We're looking at them from all different directions?
So they're defined as tourist rooming houses or short-term rentals, and the platform by which they use to market the sites is Airbnb and VRBO and Couchsurfer and things of that nature. So these a majority of them would fit within those websites and those platforms to be marketed on those
Okay.
websites.
So we when it comes to month and yearly leases, it's just a whole different ballgame because we don't have the same kind of conditional use permits and everything that goes along. Like the amount of regulation and red tape that goes along with this Airbnb type scenario is quite a bit more than being a month-to-month or a yearly lease rental situation, correct?
Yes, if you have a single-family home, we don't require any additional reviews or approval for you to rent that out on a permanent basis, month-to-month, 6 months, annually.
They're calling that permanent? That's what that's
That's
called,
the
permanent?
difference I'm making, is transient is defined as less than 30 days, and anything else as a rental would be considered more and would be considered permanent.
Okay, just seems like either one of two things. We're trying to make sure we cover every base so that nothing bad could possibly happen with these. But, I mean, we're also forgetting that the people, it seems like we're not taking into account that the people who are renting Airbnbs are paying with credit cards. They're paying a lot of money for that night. They're not necessarily bringing 200, teenagers with them. Like, I feel like we've done a lot to try to prevent the worst case scenario that probably isn't going to happen at an Airbnb. Is this what we want? Is this the amount of regulation that we need for the tourist housing? Because I don't think I just don't think it is. We're saying they can't have more than 6 people, but if they put a pull-out bed, in the living room so that the kids can sleep on the bed, or they build some, I mean, I've seen it where they, build bunk beds in the hallway kind of thing. Like we're micromanaging what they can and can't do with their own personal private property. I don't necessarily agree with what we're doing here, especially because the state has theirs and the county has their regulations. And I think we just put a lot on top of it, but I guess I don't know how to stop it. Once we put it back to the commission and we come back with all these regulation or these conditions and everything, can we stop it at this point, or do we just let it go through and make it that much harder for people to want to run this kind of a business, which is good for the community as far as I'm concerned. It's not that you're bringing in, I know we're calling it transient, but you're not really bringing in transient people that are paying $250 a night on a credit card, So I guess I don't support all the red tape we're putting on people to try to run this out of their house. Thank you.
Ms. Evanson.
Thank you. I agree with you in a way, Mr. Zacher, but I know I did a lot of research with a lot of the different municipalities within Wood County, or not within Wood County, within the state. And, I mean, almost all of them have either a conditional use permit or a permit application to go through for the short term. And I believe, I can't speak for them, but I believe it's, to give the neighbors a little bit of security per se, that they know how many people are going to be in there and, what they're doing. We've heard from public comment of some people that were worried about trashy people coming in, and trashing the place and partying and doing all this. But as we know, normally people that rent these do not do that. But it is very common to have a conditional use permit, I guess, for most municipalities is what I found. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to clarify, Kyle, that 6 number isn't only applying to visitor touring house. That's a zoning requirement for even single families.
Yeah, so typically, again, the amount of occupants is regulated by building code and the size. We also we define, I forget the exact definition, but it's essentially, we define family in our zoning ordinance, and you can have 4 unrelated individuals within a single-family home. Or you can have a family plus, 3 unrelated individuals. So when you compare us with that definition of family, we're actually pretty lenient. For example, a lot of the college towns heavily regulate the definition of family and how many unrelated individuals can live within one building. But again, getting back to the size of rooms, that's also somewhat limited by building code.
Thank you. Mr. Delaney.
As Mr. Zacher had brought up that if somebody's there for longer than 30 days, you would essentially have a rental in a place. And if this owner of any of the properties that want to have Airbnbs, if they decide to rent out their house, which they can do without any regulations, a lot of times renters can be much worse than people at an Airbnb, especially this Airbnb isn't on a lake, it's not waterfront, it is in a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood. So, I mean, for me personally, I would rather be surrounded by all Airbnbs than be surrounded by all renters, because as you know, renters, they can have cars in their yard on blocks and their grass is growing up, and it's much worse than having somebody who keeps up their property because it is a business, and they may get a guest or 2 here and there that might be rowdy, but that is also taken care of by other ordinances. And putting additional ordinances, I think, or conditional uses on this, I think, is going beyond. I think it should just be a permitted use. So I'd like to make a motion just to make it a permitted use for both 6 and 7.
So we have a motion. Five is just a discussion. There was no action in five.
Could I clarify
Yes,
something?
please.
If the use is, or if the direction is to make it a permitted use, it would require an ordinance amendment, and we'd have to, significantly change the ordinance, which is fine. But then I think you need to identify if you still want to provide a license or a permit aside from the zoning code regulation. So a lot of other communities, if they don't require a conditional use permit, they still have a license in their licensing chapter where they license tourist rooming houses, and they list several supplemental standards. So it's one way to avoid having to go through the conditional use process and the notifications and the public meetings, but on the back end, internally, they're still licensing the facilities. So if the motion is made and accepted to permit these by right in the zoning code, we'd have to come back next month because there's noticing requirements to amend the ordinance. Come back next month with that ordinance amendment. But I think at the same time, we'd probably have to come back with an amendment to the licensing chapter if you choose to license them in any capacity aside from the zoning regulation.
My problem with this is that, well, one, you want to treat each home differently. That you don't want to have a set of standards that applies to every house. Like, that's one of the big reasons that I'm really against a conditional use permit, is treating people differently. I think that opens us up to liability as far as who is, they could claim that it's because they're of a different race or whatever the case may be. So not having it different for every house, I think, is one problem that we have. Having these conditional uses, they're already covered in such as the non-transfer of ownership, that it doesn't stay. That's already covered in the state law. So I don't understand how that could be, like, why everything is so redundant. I think it's just putting it's just the same thing. We're getting an extra $100 or $110, whatever it is, for the permit, and I think it's unnecessary.
No, you're fine. Dean, you had,
No,
did you remove your request?
yeah, I removed the request to speak,
Okay.
but does he have to amend his motion?
What's that?
Sorry.
Oh,
So, does the motion have to be amended because of an ordinance change? Is that what we're saying?
his motion would require an ordinance change, but also know that the applicants will be waiting additional months before they get their application approved also. Go ahead, Kyle.
And I was going to speak to that I think with regards to due process, our existing ordinance as it's written, the applicants having met and paid the application fee, this being postponed once already, I would strongly advise that the two in front of you today be acted upon. If they're denied, I think citing the conditional use permit standards that we feel are not met would be appropriate, given, again, Wisconsin Act 67, which significantly limits conditional uses and our ability to regulate them. And then if there's also direction to come back later to amend the ordinance, and if these were approved, let's say, and we come back later and amend the ordinance, well, then they either would be non-conforming or they would conform if a conditional use is no longer necessary, then there's no harm that's done in approving them. So again, would strongly recommend action on the two items before you. I do want to note also that there's two requests coming in August that will go to Plan Commission and Common Council. And the soonest, again, that we could amend the ordinance would be August. Well, actually, we might we might be past the deadline for a public hearing notice for August Plan Commission. So it might be till September before we can come back with an ordinance amendment.
Thank you. I agree. I think it's important to act on the two that are before us. Mr. Austin?
Just want to be clear, the additions of the additional conditions, specifically 9 and 10, were basically agreed upon by Plan Commission because that was the advantage of registering versus conditional use permit. You know that you're issuing the permit to the owner, so you have a name tied to it. So we felt the best thing to do would be include that in our conditions. So if a property were to sell, it wouldn't necessarily, the conditional use permit wouldn't be transferred with the property. It would have to be made known to the new owner, and they'd have to reapply. Secondly, to Mr. Delaney's concern about being different, again, to reiterate what Kyle has said, it's about building code and the areas that you are going to be renting out. So there's always going to be a difference if you're comparing a 3-bedroom property to a single-bedroom dwelling that's actually number 7, I think, is the owner lives on site. That's correct, Kyle?
Yep, so it's owner occupied.
So it's owner occupied. So, I mean, there's going to be differences, unique differences to each property. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Evanson?
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of say what Mr. Austin was saying is that, I mean, they're not different per se as who can do what. It's just basically the number of people that are allowed according to code that would probably change the conditional use permit. And I am glad that the commission included that it wouldn't just roll over with the land if a property owner left. So that was very good. As far as Mr. Delaney talking about the state of Wisconsin regulating all of that, I mean, I kind of pulled up their permit, but it's not as, I mean, there's not as many conditions in the state as it is at the city level. Is that correct, Kyle?
Yeah, I think you'll find that for the most part, they set some pretty basic standards, but most communities will provide additional regulation. Like, for example, Marshfield, it's a permitted use, but in their licensing chapter, they have about 5 pages of additional standards, additional reviews, inspections, tourist or room tax, a county permit. So it's very similar in terms of the conditions placed upon them. The difference is there's not that added zoning step for review, but additional conditions in the licensing chapter.
That's why I just wanted to clarify that that we would have the authority to do those things. So thank you.
So we have a motion and a second, which the motion does not address the 2 existing permits that are hung out there.
So then we,
No, what I said, past them being a permitted use. 6 and 7, we're taking action on 6 and
But-
7 by passing them as a permitted use.
But the zoning ordinance does not allow a permitted use, so in the zoning ordinance, the ordinance changes need to be made to create a permitted use. And that's what Kyle was saying, that ordinances will have to be brought forward. So technically, right now, they're not a permitted use until the zoning chapter is changed.
And the council cannot approve is what you're saying? The council doesn't have the power to approve these as a permitted use?
Correct, because there is no permitted use in the chapter right now under zoning ordinance. So I think what Kyle explained, you can approve these, and once the zoning code is changed to allow permitted use, then they would become permitted uses versus conditional uses, correct?
Right, essentially the conditional use that would have been granted previously would become no. If there were to be additional standards under the licensing chapter, that individual that previously was approved may have to meet the additional standards under the licensing chapter. But ultimately, as a permitted use, the conditional use permit would be, again, null.
Correct. And there's been no discussion of creating a license at this point. Mr. Zacher.
So am I to understand that we have to do two separate things here? We need to, I know we have this motion on the table right now, but we have to go back and make the motion to pass these as is so we can let these people get on with their business under the conditional use permit? Everything, right? That's what we're asking for?
Yeah, so that's what I'm recommending. You can either approve or deny the conditional use permit. The only other option that they would have to them would be a use variance under the Zoning Board of Appeals, and neither applicant has applied for a use variance. So it's either approve or deny or postpone the conditional uses that are before you. But you can also instruct staff to bring back an ordinance amendment at a future date to shift the use from conditional to permitted.
Okay. Is that what you're, I guess I'm just asking, is that kind of what you're asking for, Mr. Delaney, to change this ordinance from special use permit to licensing?
Yeah, and I had made a motion to have this sent back to the legislative committee so that they could discuss it and bring it back to the council. Legislative committee hasn't met, I think, since last October, was it? Or
Yeah.
might even been before that. So, I mean, it would be nice to see the legislative get together.
This would actually, though, would fall under Plan Commission, so that the zoning change or allowing the permitted use, and then it'd be brought through Plan Commission. The public hearing would be held at Plan Commission, and then that ordinance would come back to council for your approval or denial. So it wouldn't need to go to legislative.
Did you say it wouldn't need to?
It would not need to. It'd come through Plan Commission.
So we had sent this back last time asking for this. I don't know if it wasn't well represented of what the council or what the motion was to send it back. But not only did it come back, it came back with even more conditions on it, which is not what I'm looking for. I don't think that I would vote for additional conditions because it's already well regulated through the county and through the state. There's already inspections done, which gets done every year on a yearly basis. So, yeah, I'm not for approving additional conditions.
Correct. So what, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dean.
I'm in agreement with Mr. Delaney and in terms of the amount of regulation, but it sounds like we're pushing them out. These two items, they're not going to get this for a while if we move forward, right? We're talking probably a couple months before,
Yeah,
in theory. These two that we can approve, but then they're going to have to wait for the ordinance.
well, so you could approve it as presented, and then it would be completed tonight. And then you can make a referral back or make a referral that we're going to allow this to be a permitted use in those zoning districts. And then that ordinance would go to Plan Commission, have a public hearing, and then it'd be forwarded to council. And then you could approve that ordinance or make your modifications if there is something that you don't like in that ordinance. But it would be an ordinance that would be adopted by council.
But so if we approve it with the conditions as presented, then they can move forward immediately.
Well, and I think technically, correct, Kyle, that you can make a motion and remove conditions too. So just because these conditions are in here now, you can take those conditions out. It's yours to do what you want with.
I guess what I'm saying is I want it to be a permitted use.
Right.
But I want it to be a permitted use like today.
No.
So
Yeah, and
I
that
don't
would
want-
require.
I don't
right.
want them
Mhm.
to be, I don't want them to have to wait, especially being that time of year and get things.
No, and I think it's important that these people know leaving tonight whether or not they have a permit, because they've been
Mhm.
waiting and going through the processes, and like Patrick said, they've, jumped through all the hoops. But yeah, so yeah, it's kind of up to you what you want to do, but Ms. Evanson?
Thank you. I know Mr. Delaney said that they're regulated by the county, but I'm confused as to what. Kyle, do you know? I mean, the only time I know the health department's involved is if there's an issue. I mean,
So the state identifies that a permit is required for tourist rooming houses, but oftentimes relies on the counties to be the agent for the state, the county health department, because there's inspections required, and the state doesn't necessarily have the staff to travel around the state and inspect the health and safety of the tourist rooming house. So they typically rely on the counties as the agent to process the requirement for the permit and the inspection and so forth.
but us as code, we are making sure that the bedrooms and, the number of people. So when we're reviewing it, what are we doing? Sorry.
We as in the city?
Yes, sorry.
So, right now, we have a supplemental standards in the definition that states it should be inspected by the city building official. And I think the city building official is going to also look at life and safety, going to look at room sizes, going to make sure that the ceiling height is appropriate, or building code requirements. For example, the owner occupied one has a second floor access, so are the steps to get there appropriate? Are there railings on site that are appropriate, meeting building code to, again, protect the life and safety of the occupants? The health department doesn't have that knowledge with regards to building code. They're looking for, animals or critters or mold and mildew, those type of life and safety issues, rather than the building code.
Thank you. I just wanted you to identify that it is completely separate. So, thank you.
Oh, yeah, you're stuck. So Patrick has a request to amend the motion.
So we
Yes.
can either accept or ignore it.
Could I amend the motion to approve these two, number 6 and 7, with no conditions? That's the approve the
amendment.
conditional use without conditions.
And are you good with that?
Yes.
So we have a motion and a second.
Can I ask a question? Sorry.
Abs-
So when you're saying you're removing all the conditions, so you're saying the conditions that are where?
Yeah, in the plan
On-
commission.
For number 7, you're removing 1 through 10.
Yeah.
And number 6, 1 through 10.
Correct.
So if we remove those, Kyle, are those not in our code then? Would they, so if it says an accurate register of guest names, so we wouldn't have that, or the agent who resides within 5 miles of the city. So if we remove those, or the establishment shall have a current license required by the Wisconsin Department of Health, DATCAP. So if we remove those, those are not listed in our code now?
So I think the last 4 are not. There are 6 supplemental standards within the definition of tourist rooming house. Those 6 supplemental standards have to be met by definition under the ordinance, regardless of a condition placed upon the approval or not. I would not have the authority as the zoning administrator to not require those supplemental standards. And those supplemental standards are that a state permit be in place, that the operator display the permit, the current tourist rooming house permit, that there's accommodations for tax, so paying room tax, that there's a registry. Again, the operator keep that registry on file, and that there's an agent or operator for the tourist rooming house within 5 miles of the city, that be kept on record with the city, and building codes, that prior to the establishment of a tourist rooming house or expansion, the building inspector shall certify that the dwelling meets applicable building code requirements.
So the ones that we technically, so those are in code, so the ones that we wouldn't have a say is if they left, what Mr. Austin was saying.
Correct, so there are, let me pull the minutes up here.
I'm sorry. And
There'd
then
be 3 or 4 conditions at the end of the minutes that would not be enforceable, or are not supplemental standards. And they were again, the one requiring review within 6 months, notice to the city if ownership changes, and review through the Plan Commission and Council if ownership changes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Zacher. Okay, thank you. Mr. Rio?
I normally don't do this, but I am going to call for the question.
So then we need,
The motion on the floor right now is to amend the original motion. Because there was a second on that motion, the body has to vote on whether you want to amend the original motion. It's not Mr. Delaney's motion. It belongs to the
body,
floor.
yep.
So the vote on the table right now is the vote whether to amend the motion. And then if you do vote to amend it,
that's the new motion.
then the new motion is put in place.
And then Tom's calling for the question to end cease debate,
Right,
which would have to be voted on also.
right.
So why don't we vote on the amendment? Everybody understand what the amended motion is?
So Mr. Delaney wants to remove all the conditions.
Approve the permits without the 10 conditions. Correct.
And we're just voting on whether you want to amend that motion or not. You're not voting on that amendment. You're just voting on whether or not to amend the original motion.
Correct.
Make
That will
sense?
be the motion on the
So
table.
if you
then.
don't want it, you want it as written, then I'd vote no.
That would be correct.
Correct. Yeah, which is unique because the original motion, if you remember, is to approve it as a permitted use, which technically we can't do either. Kind of confusing.
So you're just
So then-
voting to amend his original motion, which was he wanted it a permitted use only,
Correct.
which we can't do. So he's amending the motion so that the motion can then be, after that, the motion can then be to approve it without any conditions, as written, but without any conditions.
So all you're voting for is whether he could amend his motion. right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I would think it would make sense to amend the motion to be
Yeah, and
like a
then-
legal motion,
And
and then you can vote up or down that motion. Maybe. Yeah, if that makes sense.
so,
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Okay. Please cast your ballots. Maybe. So that motion carried 7 ayes, 1 nay. So now we have the original motion on the floor, which is to approve the permits without conditional use. Tom has called for the question. So technically, we should vote on whether or not we want to cease debate.
Can I just one clarification? I thought that his original was to amend it to do a permit process.
So his amended motion was to approve the permits without the conditions.
Because I thought the
The
original
original
motion
motion
was to
was
do a
to-
permit, but
To
we
do a
can't.
permit.
But wasn't that the original motion that's on the floor then, right now?
Nope, the one that
It's the one that's on the floor right now, but then we just took a vote to amend it.
That one.
So now that one's been amended to the new one, which is to approve with no conditions.
Correct.
But
Thomas,
first, we're going to do
question.
the calling the question. So what that means is that we're going to cease debate. So we need to vote on whether you want to do that or not. So,
Correct. What a night for the attorney to be off.
Can I clarify one thing?
Yes,
So
go
it's
ahead.
to approve items 6 and 7, which are the two applicant requests, but it's to not take action on 5 yet or provide any direction on 5, which would be the ordinance itself.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And technically, that's where I would think you could send that back to create it as being a permitted use if that's what the body chooses to do. Yeah. So is there, I don't think it needs a second, but okay. So we have a motion and a second to cease debate, basically. Nope, you're fine. Nope, let's make you sure you get it right. Correct. Do you want to discuss or cease talking about it? That motion carried 6 ayes, 2 nays. So now we're back to the motion on the floor, which is to approve the permits without any conditions. I need a drink.
Could you repeat that?
Yes. No. So the motion on the floor is to approve the two permits, or the two applications without the 10 conditions. However, the state does have conditions, basically 1 through 6, 1 through 7. They're already in the state statute.
So if we vote no, then they wouldn't be approved these at all,
Correct. Or at least on this motion.
but there'll be time to make another motion.
Yes. Yep. Correct.
Those are actually local supplemental standards in the definition of tourist rooming house.
Well,
No conditions, but we still have 6 supplemental standards that serve as requirements if you operate a tourist rooming house.
under state statute.
Under local ordinance, we have 6. Under state statute, we have a few others, like, that are very similar, room tax, getting a permit through the state or county agent, and
Yep.
so forth.
what did you call the 6 items? Supplemental?
Supplemental standards under the
Yeah,
definition of tourist rooming house in the zoning
I
ordinance.
don't think that's part of the motion, but it's just fuel
Okay.
or information. Yeah, it's there. It's, no matter what we do, we can't change the state law. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. I gotta bring up my thing. I am voting yay. That motion carried 5 ayes, 4 nays. So now we have item 5, which is the guess there was no action on it, but I would think this item would be the item where if you want to send it back for a change for permitted use, maybe? Or, yeah, that's true. So a motion by Patrick.
I'll make a motion to send it back and make tourist rooming houses a permitted use.
It could be just a referral. And then Kyle would take it to planning and then bring it through.
Sounds fine by me, thanks.
I just want to clarify, but didn't they already bring it back? Is there something that they can only bring back an item so many times? Didn't you guys talk about that at the second meeting already?
There was conceptual conversation because we didn't have enough time to, again, notice. Code requirements require a Class 2 notice in a public hearing. And so when Common Council directed us to send it back to Plan Commission, we were beyond the public hearing and noticing deadline. So we could not act on it. So it was for conceptual conversation. So now if we're being directed to pursue an ordinance amendment, we will actually publish a notice twice and have a public hearing, which either can happen at a special meeting in August or can get pushed out to the September schedule.
But I mean, just talking about versus the permit process or conditional use. The commission chose the conditional use permit would be, you thought in your experts' opinions, better than the permit process.
Correct. They made a recommendation to maintain the status quo, keep it as a conditional use within the ordinance.
Right.
Again, they're a recommending body, so if Common Council chooses to direct staff differently or chooses to ignore the Plan Commission recommendation, I think they would have that authority to do so. I think in that case, it may help to have a vote. If not, we can certainly still bring it back to Plan Commission, but know that Plan Commission could recommend denial. If they recommend denial of changing it, it would then work its way up via that recommendation to council, and council, again, would have the ultimate say with the ordinance amendment.
Okay, because that's just where I'm getting at, because the last time the council said, no, they thought they wanted a permit process, so it went back. And then you guys talked, nope, you want a conditional use. Well, now we're sitting here, some of you are saying, no, you want the permit process. So it goes back to you guys, and and the commission says, nope, we want a conditional use. How long are we going to keep doing this circle? I mean, if the body wants to vote on, why keep sending it back? I guess this is 2 months now, so I guess that's just where I'm getting at. We keep sending it back to try to get a different answer, but the commission wants this, so would it even have to go back? Would it go on the agenda? I'm embarrassed. It's just kind of silly, so.
No, I guess I disagree, because now the council is saying, before it was come back with a recommendation on whether to do either or. Council's saying now, no, this is what we want to do. And I guess if the council needs to take a vote to do that, that's fine. But once it's sent back, it's going to go through, Kyle's going to present an ordinance to change it to a permitted use under the zoning ordinance. They'll a list item under R2 that tourist rooming houses are a permitted use there. And then that would, whatever Plan Commission decides to do, it won't matter. If they're in favor of it or disagree with it, it still will come to with a recommendation to the Plan Commission, from the Plan Commission to council, and council will vote either way what they want to do at that point.
But if they bring it back as a conditional use again, then it's going to be another month.
No,
Oh,
it wouldn't come back. There would be no discussion on it being a conditional use. He would prepare an ordinance, have a public hearing on allowing it as a permitted use. Plan Commission will discuss it, and if they agree or disagree, they'll bring forth recommendation. But it won't be a discussion on should it be a permitted use or not. It would be just a strict, a flat-out ordinance change. They would debate or discuss it there, bring a recommendation to us, to the council here, and the council will vote either way. But there won't be any discussions whether or not it should be a conditional use permit or not. Just an ordinance change.
But I'm saying, so right now, we're directing Kyle to draft an ordinance.
And then run it through, have a public hearing, run it through Plan Commission, and then council voted up or down.
But didn't we just, I guess I'm confused. When did we vote that we wanted it a permit process?
It's not a permit, it's a permitted use. It's allowed within the zoning code without having a conditional use.
We can't vote, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think the clarification exists, at least from what I've gathered, Sherry, in the action that Plan Commission took under item 5 in this last month's minutes, and whether or not that they've already provided direction to the council. And it's my opinion that that was conceptual. They took no action. It was more verbal conversation to get feedback and direct staff. If Plan Commission would have acted on it and it was an official noticed ordinance amendment, then yes, bringing it back may not make sense. But because it was only conceptual in nature, I think the council and the Plan Commission could act on the item officially as a ordinance amendment and would not, I guess, be in, violation of previous actions or direction, because again, no action was taken in the minutes for item 5.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I think technically Plan Commission could vote it down, and then council could vote it down, and then we'd be ended up with some other discussion. That's how it could play out.
You can't take action on it because no action was taken at Planning Commission. So it has to go back, he's going to do the ordinance amendment, that's what the referral was, and then it has to go through Planning Commission, and they'll vote up or down, and then it comes to council. But it's not on the agenda that way, so you can't take action on something that's not on the agenda. Does that make more sense?
Thank you.
Okay, so there's no action needed on 5, since there was no action. And we can move on to, so Rita, yes, the permit has been approved, and Kyle can help you. Kyle would be, yeah. Yeah. Okay. We're on to consider action, the adoption action of standing committee of the Common Council for item A, Finance and Property Committee meeting held July 5th. Mr. Zacher.
Thank you. The Finance and Property Committee met at 5:01 PM on Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. All members of the committee were present. Item 1, call to order. Chairperson Zacher called the meeting order at 5:01 PM. Number 2, consider a request from the fire department to order the chassis for their next ambulance. Moved by Venneman, second by Bemke. Motion carried 3-0. Number 3, consider a request from the fire department to apply for the Wisconsin Flex Grant. It was moved by Bemke, seconded by Venneman. To approve the request from the fire department to apply for the Wisconsin Flex Grant in the amount of $41,000 pending approval of the finance director. Motion carried 3-0. Item 4, consider approval of proposals from the park and building supervisor to provide and install 6 HVAC packaged rooftop units to replace the existing units on the Centralia Center rooftop. It was moved by Bemke, seconded by Zacher, to pass this motion 3-0. Item number 5, consider a request from Drop In Again LLC, Tammy Caston, agent for the retail Class B fermented malted beverage and retail Class B intoxicating liquor license for the premises located at 2963 State Highway 73 South. It was moved by Bemke, seconded by Venneman, to pass this motion. Motion carried 3-0. Number 6, consider for approval the appointment of Geneva J. Rapp as successor agent for the retail Class A fermented malt beverages and retail Class A intoxicating liquor licenses for West Side Express Mart LLC, doing business as West Side Express Mart for the premises located at 1040 West Grand Avenue. This is moved by Venneman, seconded by Zacher. To pass the motion, motion carried 3-0. Item number 7, consider for approval temporary retail Class B fermented malt beverages license for Central Wisconsin Cultural Center, Inc., 2651 A Street South for the following events. A, open mic event to be held from 7 PM to 10 PM on the following Fridays, August 26th, September 30th, October 28th, November 25th, and December 30th, 2022. B, the scratchboard art of Alex Hewitt and Pat Roosh exhibit opening reception to be held from 5:30 PM to 7:30 PM on Thursday, September 22nd, 2022. C, holiday gifts and art fair event to be held from 5:30 PM to 7:30 PM on Thursday, November 10th, 2022. And a temporary retail Class B fermented malt beverages license and temporary retail Class B wine license for the Art on Tap event to be held from 6 PM to 9 PM on Saturday, October 1st, 2022. It was moved by Bemke, seconded by Veneman to pass this motion in its entirety. Motion carried 3-0. Item number 8, 2023 budget discussion. Budget was discussed, no action was taken at that time. Item number 9, audit of bills. It was moved by Bemke, seconded by Zachary to approve check numbers 13149 to 131490. Motion carried 3-0. Set next meeting date. Next regular committee meeting will be held on Tuesday, October 2nd, 2022 at 5 PM. Item 11, in open session, the committee may vote to go into closed session under section 19.851E of the Wisconsin statutes, which reads deliberating and negotiating the purchases of public property, the investing of public funds, or conducting of other specified public business whenever competitive bargaining reasons require a closed session. It was moved by Zacher, seconded by Bemke to go into closed session. Motion carried 3-0. Committee went into closed session. In closed session, the committee discussed negotiations and strategy regarding redevelopment and possible purchases of the former Northern Steel Castings, Inc. foundry located at 330 9th Avenue South, parcel ID 3402599. The committee adjourned. In closed session, moved by Zacher, seconded by Veneman, passed 3-0, adjourned at 6:40. And with that, I make a motion to accept the minutes as read.
So there's a motion. I was going to say, Sherry, did you want to hold something out?
I just wanted clarification. So on number 4, on the rooftop units
That
for the
neat.
Centralia,
Can
that
you hold
was-
it out?
Oh.
We should probably hold it out.
Okay.
Because, yeah, we need to have a discussion.
number 4.
Tom, did you need something held out? Number 3. Oh, correct. Yes, and Tim did sign the grant. And that was the pending approval, is approval on that grant. Correct,
Yeah, he just wasn't here that day
to sign it.
to sign the grant.
Yep. Okay. Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. I wasn't at the meeting that night, and I see by the last item, it was,
I don't think it needs.
taken up, and I know it was brought up at the last council meeting, I believe, of discussion to look at that. And it ended in closed session, so it's probably not necessarily worth the discussion right now, but, and it may be something for us to look at to do, but again, there's a lot of ways that the city has to look at how to spend the money that they have, and where that may be a very big and concerning one that could take preference. There may be, I hope it doesn't take preference over ones that have been on the docket longer than that, even though that's been laying there for a long time. So just, I hope because it was brought to the council a month ago that it doesn't give oomph ahead of others that may be needing a little oomph too. And that's with the Northern Steel Castings. So that's my, it seems like sometimes some people have a little more push and pull to move things, to get them to the committee level maybe. So with that, so I guess that takes care of mine. We can go to Sherry's, I guess, number 4.
So we have a motion and a second to adopt the balance of the report. So we should take up that first. So please cast your ballots. So that motion carried 8 ayes, 0 nays. Now on to item 4. Just a little background. So, you know, there's about 200, and Jake's here also. So we have 12 rooftop units at Centralia. 6 of them were received an estimate for replacement. We have about $235,000 in the depreciation account for Centralia Center. The rooftop units and controllers come to just shy of 500,000. So the question was, where's the other half of the money come from? I spoke to Tim and he suggested, you know, you could use ARPA or reserves, but he thought reserves would be the route to go. Since then, one of the rooftops has failed and the coils in it. We've learned that it's going to be $8,000 to replace those coils for the heating part of it.
What was the number again? I'm sorry.
For which part? $8,000 for the,
I think it said 80.
oh, 8. And so that will be needed to be fixed prior to winter if we don't do anything. Last winter, we lost a controller board for the company. They don't make them anymore, but the company made us one for like $1,200. So the heat, they could have heat in ADRC, I believe, which was down for quite a while. So these things have long lived out their life of their usefulness, and you know, we still have to have a discussion down the road about the other 6, and then there's still probably $500,000 for a new roof. But working with roofers, we've kind of, I think, have bought about another 4 to 5 years on the roof, so that can be planned out a little bit better for that replacement. So that's a little background information. Go ahead, Sherry.
Thank you.
Yep.
You answered a lot of my questions, but getting back to, I know, I don't want to get off topic about the budget, but I just want to know why there's not a capital improvement plan for these buildings. Why aren't we seeing that? I mean, eventually things are going to start failing. Why isn't there money set aside for that? And with budget time coming up, I hope we remember that. I mean, I don't want to get off topic, like I said, but it's the same with the aquatic center. I mean, there's no money in there, so we're already $250,000 short. We took it out of the depreciation. If we put it in take it out of reserves, and then the other 6 go, where's that money coming from? I mean, we have assets, but we can't afford to maintain them. We're always behind the ball. And I'm just wondering, with Finance and Property Committee, how do we mandate that we have capital improvement plans for things? I mean, I know the streets department does, but why isn't there something in place? It just seems so ridiculous that we're trying to find money out of reserves to replace asset. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me, so.
So there was a lot more money in that account, which would have easily covered this, but the experts at that time and administration decided that the parking lot needed to be redone instead of rooftop units, and that's where they decided to divert that money to, versus doing, I say, the less showy things.
But is there a capital improvement plan of what, I mean, now that we know that, okay, we have 5 years out for the roof, we have this, so someone could email me that? I mean, we could see.
So there isn't a capital improvements plan yet. And that's what needs to be worked on. But that's what the depreciation accounts are for. But those accounts, money was diverted elsewhere. Mr. Ram.
Thank you, Your Honor. Granted, the money at one point in time was diverted, I guess, to redo the parking lot, which was in need of it. But at the same token would be that, knowing that these units were going to have to were going to fail anyway, that it should have been, money should have been replaced. Parking lots needed to be acted upon at some point in time anyway. I guess the question I have, and I'm glad, Sherry, that you did hold it out, and I guess it's, the part that got me was reading pending funding. To me, the plan should be there, but also, how are we going to do it? ARPA funding, this funding, what funding? Obviously, I think it has to be done. So I think it's due diligence for us as a council to move forward, and we have to, I guess, take the bull by the ears, or horns, whatever, move it along, that this has to be done. And somehow it has to be funded. Now, is it we limp through the next budget process so that we don't do something till next year, that we limp through till then, hopefully that the whole thing don't crash, that we can get that far? Or do we take out reserves to do something now? Or do we use ARPA funds if we can do that? I think it's up to us as a council, the 8 of us, to make a decision. This needs work. The center over there has been, over the years, has sucked money out of us for a lot of different projects. From roof to flooring and everything in between. Painting. So this is one, I think, like I said, looks like to me, there's probably about maybe the 3 options. Cross our fingers, go through the budget process, and is there a way we can limp through till next year? Or do we use ARPA funding and do it now? Or take money out of the reserves and get it done now? But I think it behooves us as a council to step forward, step up to the plate. And not kick the can down the road again and wait till next month or the month after or the month after. Because next month, you're going to be starting, we have started, I shouldn't say so starting, but the budget's going to be getting into full swing here. So it's what route do we want to go? Whichever route we want to go, the money has to be spent. That's, I think, I guess, unless there's somebody can tell me different, that's there. We just have to decide which route we want to go. So if you're want to cross your fingers and go through the budget and hope that we can piecemeal and hold it together till next year. I It's up to you. We have to, like I said, can't keep kicking the can down the road. Things cost money. And if we want to have something, we have to pay to operate it. And there are things that the city does have. They took out money to do. It's a great, from all I've been told, a great addition to the city, but it costs money, the Aquatic Center. But the decision was made to go that route. Where that's off topic, but it isn't, as it was mentioned. It's part of the discussion, too. So to have things that work and are up to date, can attract people here, we have to spend the money. Unless somebody is actually going to collect that, something falling out of the tree, and is going to give it to us, we have to decide what we're going to do. It's not free. I guess I would like to know the difference, maybe, or what is the difference between, or the advantage and disadvantage would be of taking ARPA funding and versus the reserves. What would be the pros and cons, I guess, of each one?
Yeah, my understanding it was either or. There was
Kind of a
not,
wash, or
yeah.
whichever way you want it to.
The issue with.
Could one that we could,
Yeah.
would one we could dig into,
Yeah, the ARPA fund,
ARPA that we could dig into first, either one that we could, or the
you can
same?
do either one, but the ARPA fund, obviously, it's a federal grant, so with finance, it has to go through a single audit, which is a more of a bigger process. However, depends on what we do with the ARPA funds. You know, if you spend 1 million on one thing or 1 million on 10 things, you know, the 10 things is a lot more complicated in the audit process. The reserves, that's kind of why they're there, for emergency type situations. We have healthy reserves. I wish I could give you the number off the top of my head at the point, but I don't know it. And, you know, that's like the emergency fund. And it's just disappointing that we're at this point. Obviously.
I wish we weren't too. I guess I would like to see that we move forward and complete it and do it.
Mhm.
That would get it, I guess, off the table. And that's why I wanted to know what there are the three options we could try to, I guess, through the budget process go, but it's something that to me anyway, listening to this, that it's something that we probably should do now, I think.
Well, how much lead time is that on the orders, Jake?
They're anywhere from 28 to 54 weeks out.
28 to
28 to 54 weeks.
28 to
Yeah, so
54
we're
weeks
still looking
before
at
we get
next-
the rooftop.
What?
28 to 54 weeks out. So next
28 to 54 weeks?
weeks. Yep.
Well, I think
That's just to get them ordered and then,
Right.
well, I think that puts a little more what I'm talking about,
Right.
that we do something.
Mhm.
I guess that even makes it a little more stupid to kick it down the road further and further. Because that 28 to 54 weeks becomes 54 to 72 weeks eventually.
Right.
And then we got an updated quote, and it went up
So I think However we
$90,000.
fund it or what we do, maybe the second, maybe something that we decide maybe later, but maybe the commitment is that we commit to do it. And then we have this, how we're going to pay for it. I knew it'd take a while, but I guess I didn't realize it was going to be that far out. Wow.
And how far out is to fix that coil? If we just fix the coil to,
Say maybe November.
yeah. And like I was just saying, though, Jake got updated quotes and it went up $90,000 getting updated quotes. It's out of control.
Mr. Mayor, do I still have the floor? Or-
Yes.
Thank you. We're halfway there with money that we got, you said?
Correct.
About approximately, give or take.
I think we're over halfway with the depreciation account set up over there.
Well, I would make a motion. I guess it's here. I guess what's there, but it's pending, so this would be, I guess, to commit ourselves to doing what's in this proposal. However, I have to word this to do it. Without the, I guess, I would like to add, the council's gonna commit to do this and find the funding, and to put this into process so this 28 to 54 weeks gets put into motion.
I mean, I think the question was
So I
the
don't know.
other half of the funding, where that was going to come from.
And I guess that can be part of the discussion if we have to, but I'd rather not wait till next month. I mean, I'd rather make something tonight than. And I guess between the two and us as the 8 of us here, and if others have advice, I guess on which route to go and take the money from, or get the money from.
So we definitely have a line of speakers. We definitely have a line of speakers.
Okay,
So there might be some thoughts.
that'd be it, because I, when I heard that just, like I said, I knew there'd be a wait time to get stuff, but that astounded me. You're starting to talk over a year. Wow. And if we kick the can, like I said, down the road a month or 2 months or something again, there'd be 2024. Could be. Wow. Okay.
All right, Jay's next. Oh, I'm sorry, Matt.
Thank you. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to say I appreciate, Sherry, that you're talking about, the Finance and Property Committee and us getting on the same page with the capital improvements plan, and that's something we've been talking about since last year in terms of what is it? What are all the things that we have, and how can you ever get out of debt if you don't even know how much you owe and what's all coming up in the near future? So I'm glad to hear, we're on the same page. And Tom, I'm glad to hear you're talking about, it's our responsibility. We're the ones who are responsible for the money. I'm glad to hear that. Like, I think we can all work together, because I feel like sometimes this is going to be we're up against a big battle to try to, get ourselves out of debt and get the park, somewhat paid off so that we can afford to actually upkeep it now that we have it. I mean, there's so many more questions that are going to be coming up, and the amount of money that we're talking about, to me, is just astronomical. And the fact that we haven't been saving up for years and years, I mean, we do have some reserves, which is good for us, but I don't know. I think we're in a bad place, and I don't know if I get a little bit too freaked out by it, but I think it's real. I don't know. So I'm glad to hear that we're getting more on the same page in terms of that. We have this capital improvements plan that's coming up where you guys are working on it, correct? So we're going to have that set out for us so we can look at it every month, every year, throughout the year to say, what are we working on? Where does the rooftop units fit into it? And, so that we have a way better idea 6 months, a year ahead of time as to what's coming, instead of, bam, all of a sudden we're talking about, 6 air conditioning units for $500,000. And it's tough to put on 8 people and say, this is what we got to do, we got to make a decision. And we shouldn't be saying we're just going to cross our fingers and hope for the budget to come out. That's not how you run a good budget as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for all that, and I think we can work together to really pull this whole thing off and get us in a much better financial position in the near future. As for these rooftop units, I think this is the worst possible time. Again, I'm not putting it on you, Jake. This isn't, you're just the bearer of bad news. This is the worst possible time to be talking about buying these massive units because we know there's a crunch and the supply lines, like we know that, and we should be able to wait them out. What I'm hearing is we need a coil for one right now, right? And these are, correct me, there's 6 big units and 6 small units, right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yep.
Okay, and we're talking about the big units right now.
Correct. Yep.
So roughly each one of these is about 100 and a quarter, somewhere in there.
Something. Yeah, they vary. I mean, some are
Not
20
quite that,
tons,
yeah.
some are 12.5 tons, so they vary.
Okay. So, I mean, my take on it right now is not the right time to make this full-on purchase for every unit that we need, since we've needed them for the last probably 10 years, and we can probably stretch some of these out for a little while yet. So we have $230,000 to work with, and if we take those units out of commission, so there's 6 of them that we need, so we have half the money. We take 3 out of commission, we put 3 new ones in maybe, if we have to do 3 right now. If we can get away with 1 or some parts, chances are good we should do that. But if we take 3 out of commission, we can use those for parts for the other 3 to get us past the supply chain blockade right now, which is supposedly it's starting to free up a little bit. So I think we can work our way through this without going, because if you're saying $90,000 more than 6 months ago,
Since May.
since May. So, I mean, we know we're in a weird situation, and to me, it's not the right time to pull the trigger, but it is the right time to, either get 1 or, up to 3, we can decide on that, or just get the parts that we need right now. I know we don't want to pay the money for the parts, and I don't believe in gimping things together. Trust me, I don't believe I've learned my lesson enough times, but I think right now is not the time to just make this full-on massive purchase. So that's my take. Thank you.
Jay?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I disagree a little bit with Matt. So 2 things, we're about to spend $9,000 on these units in the last several months anyways. Don't see that getting any better. And the fact that in the last 2 months that they have gone up $100,000, and then going back to the issue of when can you get them? I think we have half the reserve in the Centralia Fund, is that correct? And I guess my only questions, I will fully support Tom's motion to replace these units. I guess my only question would be is, do you spend that cash reserve down that the Centralia has set aside, and how much I would prefer to see it come out of the reserve? So, but do you spend that down, the Centralia Fund down completely?
I think that's what it's there for, unfortunately. But through the budget process, there'll be more added to it. And so if you spend it now, next budget season, there'll be some more in there. And then hopefully it can build up. But unfortunately, there's still 6 more rooftop units, and there's still a roof that's going to have to be dealt with down the road that we need to plan for.
So I guess what it comes down to is if we replace these now, we're going to be looking at 6 more units. It's just going to keep piling up and piling up. So do you want to do the potentially $1.5 million all at once, or do you want to take it a little bit at a time? I think we need to replace these units now. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Mr. Austin?
I agree with Mr. Bemke. I don't think we can count on prices eventually coming down. Just look at the lead times. That's a pretty good indicator. So at this point, it's make the best decision for what you have. And this has been a problem for a long time, and we're getting to the point of failure. And that's why it's here, and that's why it's urgent. So in my opinion, we need to move forward with our repairs. And secondly, I would favor, as far as funding, to dip into the reserves for this. ARPA, like the mayor had mentioned, there's going to be some more overhead if we start splitting the money up here, there, and everywhere. I think there's plenty of worthy big ticket projects within the city, we could dedicate ARPA to and try to save ourselves some headache on top of it as well. So, thank you.
Ms. Evanson. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep looking at two. Thank you. Mr. Benjamin.
Yeah, my question is quick. What exactly is in ARPA at this point, dollar-wise?
About 1.1.
1.1. Okay, that's all I really wanted to know.
Okay. Now, Ms. Evanson.
Thank you. I kind of agree with Jay and Mr. Austin as far as, so how bad are the other 6 that we're not doing?
Jake.
The other 6 are actually a lot newer. They were installed in 2015. So according to our master asset plan of the building, those are good for another 10, 15 years.
And the roof?
The roof
is bad.
It leaks every time it rains.
Okay. I guess that's just why, I guess if we're doing I don't know, I'm kind of like Jay. I mean, I'd rather get all the units done at one time, so we're ahead of schedule for once in our life. But if they're new, obviously they ain't new, but if the roof is that bad, I guess I would have rather, done them and the roof at the same time, is I guess what I would have used money for, so we can get ahead of the ball game on one of our buildings. But I don't know what that cost is. We don't have quotes for that, but.
So we've been talking with roofers, because as there's leaks, we've had them come in, try to fix them, track down leaks, get estimates. And I think we're to the point where the roofer said we should be good for the next 5 years on the roof. And some of the thought is that instead of having 12 rooftop units in a roof, all kind of coming due at the same time, trying to get it broken out so it's a little bit easier to plan down the road, that we're not, in another 20 years, that we're another 12 rooftops and another roof. So we're trying to break it up a little bit, since when it was built new, everything was new at the same time. And I think it's easier to have it kind of come due at different times.
Right, and I agree. And I didn't hold this out because I wasn't going to vote for it. We need to do it. It's just, again, reiterating that we need to plan for the future. We need to get ahead. We can't keep skimping along, trying to cut when we're not getting ahead of the ball game, and then all of a sudden things are failing and we're spending money silly by keep trying to replace things and fix things and limp things along. I just don't understand how we can do that as a city. But that was just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Mr. Delaney.
Okay, between the roof and these units, it's going to be over $1.5 million. Is that correct? It's over $1.5 million to replace these with the roof.
I forgot what the roof quotes were. I think the roof quotes were around 600,000.
Correct.
What I'm wondering is if we could maybe have an engineer look at it and see if there's any ways that we can make this space more energy efficient or greener or whatever, maybe lowering some ceiling heights inside the building where possible. And then you don't have to have so many cubic feet that you are heating and cooling. And if something like that would be better, and then maybe you wouldn't need as many units. That's just my personal opinion, that it's a huge project. I think instead of replacing what we have and going with the old technology, maybe there's something else out there that we can do. Flat roofs notoriously in Wisconsin are just horrible because we have winter here. They might work great in California, but I don't think they're really meant for Wisconsin. So if there's something else that we could do, that's what I'd be for.
So this spring, all the windows around Centralia, because we learned that there was no insulation around the windows. So the cold air just kind of flew through there. So there was a contractor that came in and that went through, council approved it, but, all the windows are now insulated. So that should definitely help on being a little more energy efficient over there. Mr. Veneman?
Yeah, I'm definitely not opposed to making sure these units are up to date. But I'm concerned about the roof. I'm concerned about the building overall. I'm concerned about making a motion tonight. And when we do have an immediate solution of a coil, maybe. But the point being is, it seemed, I agree with Mr. Delaney, there's a number of things I think we ought to look at, the overall aspect of the building, because this might be something that we need to move to the front of the capital improvement plan, but not just the roofing units, the roof itself, and the efficiency of the building. Yeah, the windows, that obviously helps, I would say. But if it leaks every time it rains, and we're dumping $500,000 into things that are sitting on a roof that leaks every time it rains, it's concerning to me. So I'm not necessarily in favor of moving on this tonight immediately without looking at the big picture. That's my thoughts.
Mr. Zacher.
Just real quick, I guess my big thing is I would love to see us stop kicking stuff down the road too. I think that we have a forward, if we can have a forward plan, so we have some of these things in sight instead of shooting from the hip all the time. And that's what puts us in the debt that we're in and puts us in the financial position we're in. So it's not that I'm not opposed to putting all brand new stuff in. I love shiny new things too. It's just the fact that we don't necessarily, we don't have the money for it. So like Tom said, we'll figure it out. I still think if we can get by without going further in debt, we got enough money to buy 3 units. And as far as I understand, the other ones are still working. We just want to replace all of them because it's easier to replace all of them at the same time. But I do too want to get to the point where we're not, having to shoot from the hip to figure things out, because we actually have a plan in place for all these high ticket items. Thank you.
So Tom has a motion, and I guess if you could repeat that motion out there, and then see if there's a second to it. Oh, so I guess was the motion, you didn't include what the funding for the other half would be, so do you have, or?
I guess that's what I was asking, to clarify that between the ARPA funding and the reserves, how to use it, which one to do. So I guess the motion would be to do it and take the money out of reserves.
And is that your second, Ms. Evans? Okay. Mr. Zacher,
So we take it out of reserves. It's our bank account,
savings.
our savings account, and we're taking it out of the Centralia Center savings account. So we're going to deplete both of those, versus the ARPA funds is 1.1 million. We can take 250 out of there and because those haven't been set aside for anything as of yet, right?
Correct, and that's a council discussion that's going to be part of the budget, is how that funding wants to be used.
And right now, Tom, you made a motion to take it out of our savings account and the Centralia savings account? Correct?
Yep.
Thank you.
Ms. Evanson.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, if they decided to use ARPA funds, won't that take longer?
We actually have the money in an account. They send it to us, and then we have to justify how we spent it.
Okay.
So that money's there also sitting in an account.
But like you said, it's for audit reasons.
Yeah, you can, and Tim was fine either way. Then he suggested that we use reserves, but yeah, so you could take $250,000 just as easily out of ARPA if that's what you want to spend your ARPA funds on. Is that, and it's really a choice. But yeah, for audit reasons, it is a different process because it's more complicated receiving federal money and then Tim has to do a single audit. But either way, eventually we're going to have to do an audit on the funds because it'd be foolish that we didn't spend it. So it really comes down to the choice, and Tim just suggested reserves. But it's indifferent, to be honest. Mr. Zacher? Yep. Mr. Bemke?
So maybe I misunderstood or didn't hear Matt correctly, but just so I'm clear, and if this was the case, I think what we're looking at is spending down the Centralia Fund, but we have pretty healthy cash reserves, so that's not going to empty that account, that will not empty that account out. So I wasn't sure what I heard, Matt, so thank you.
Mr. Benjamin?
Yeah, I'm actually still not decided on voting on this item, but I think of the roofing thing has just added to my thoughts quite a bit. And I know that we've talked about it 5 years from experts, but it just seems like an awful big capital improvement investment. So if I do vote no, it's not, I just want to go on record and say it's not that I'm opposed to fixing those. It's opposed that it seems like we're kicking the roof down the road. That's my thoughts.
I would agree with you. And I think the part of that was to hopefully get it in a position where we could kick it down the road a little bit so then we could have some time to figure out how to fund it and be ready in 5 years from now how to pay for that roof versus now how we're going to do it. Because the two are independent of each other. The roofing units don't need to sit on a new roof, and the roof can still be replaced with new rooftop units on it. But honestly, it was a kick down the road to figure out how we're going to come up with that roughly $500,000 and down the road versus it needing to be done immediately. Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion carried 5 ayes, 3 nays. Okay, we are on to B, Public Works Committee meeting held July 14th. Mr. Zacher? Oh, Mr. Austin. Oh, yeah, your finance. Oh, gosh. Sorry, Mr. Austin. Ay.
Thank you, Your Honor. The Public Works Committee met on Thursday, July 14, 2022, in the council chambers at City Hall and via remote video conference. Ryan Austin, Sherry Evanson, Dennis Pollock, and Mayor Blazer were in attendance. We called the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Item 2 was review the Engineering and Street Department monthly activity report, which was reviewed. Item 3, review request from Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools to add a mid-block crosswalk to 32nd Street North at a point of 475 feet north of Franklin Street for Washington School. Motion by Austin, second by Evanson to install a crosswalk with curb ramp and flashing LED school crossing signs and pedestrian push buttons, with Wisconsin Rapids Public Schools participating with funding at a 50% level. Add the crosswalk to the list of mid-block crosswalks in Municipal Code 340 and parking restrictions to Municipal Code Chapter 27. Motion carried 3-0. Item 4, review request from Town of Grand Rapids to participate in the repaving of Chestnut Street from 23rd Street South to 32nd Street South. Motion by Evanson, second by Austin to participate in the repaving of Chestnut Street by providing road base and crushed blacktop. Motion carried 3-0. Item 5, review the artwork proposal for the West Jackson Street roundabout. Safety and material types were discussed. The Wisconsin DOT's Facility Development Manual was reviewed. There is a general interest to continue working with the art designer to modify the material type to meet the requirement of the FDM. No action was taken. Item 6, review proposals for the rail feasibility study. All proposals were reviewed. The committee requested that staff have further discussions with 2 of the 3 firms on pricing and scope revisions and bring back to the next Public Works Committee meeting. No action was taken. Item 7, review and consider adding parking on the north side of Baker Street between 5th Street and 8th Street. Motion by Evanson, second by Austin to allow for parking on both sides of Baker between 5th Street and 8th Street. Motion carried 3-0. Item 8, review the referral list. The referral list was reviewed. Item 9 to be removed. Austin referred an item, discuss the beer and wastewater agreement and wastewater ordinance at a special Public Works meeting. Item 9, set the next meeting date. The next meeting date and time was set for Thursday, August 4th at 5 p.m. And item 10 was adjournment, and with that, I submit the report for council's approval.
Thank you. You should have been given some ordinances. So you have those ahead of time for the ordinances within the Public Works agenda or minutes. And also, I had a short conversation with Sue today, and thinking maybe that the Buren agreement should go to a committee of the whole and have a closed session there. So we're gathering some information to get ready for that. Mr. Rail.
Did I just catch that about the Buren agreement, or would you repeat that in the Buren agreement?
So I had a conversation with, through email with Sue today, and the thought is that it should go to committee of the whole, and we can have a closed session. We're getting some information together. Because technically, those agreements aren't held through Public Works, they're held through, go through Finance and Property.
Yeah.
But have an update and get an attorney update, we could do that in closed session with the committee of the whole.
Well, yeah, and it's, I had left a message with Sue, and I know she sent an email.
Yep.
To everybody, I think. I guess I didn't pay attention.
I think it was just to you, Miss Evanson and you,
Okay.
because you had called her recently about her.
Yeah.
Miss Evanson had sent her an email
I
requesting.
questioned about who gets or who takes care of the agreements like that.
Yeah.
And because I thought it went with the wastewater
It would, correct,
commission.
correct.
And so, but I guess if the council wants to be, or not say it that way, but be kept up to speed, I think it'd be that the commission itself should be kept up, should be brought up to speed of
Absolutely.
what's going on.
And that email you
And
received.
I guess I can't speak to what, but it's probably been I guess we can look back in the record, but we had the meeting right here in the council chambers with Buren. I don't remember when it was. They weren't really too receptive of what was taking place, but and so I guess we should probably get, I guess, our ducks all lined up in a row again, but I just wanted to make sure that the commission's the one that's doing the negotiating or whatever through the city attorney and whoever else we're using,
Correct.
whatever, to do that. So but somehow I guess everybody be kept up to speed on what's going on, but for sure that the commission themselves has to be kept up to speed of should be of what's there. So however they want to go with it, but just so the commission themselves weren't going to be left out of it. That was a concern of mine when I saw that. So.
Yeah. And I think, and Mr. Austin can attest to it, I think the very questions that this council has, the commission has. And so, but ultimately, you're right, it's a commission agreement that's approved by Finance and Property. I think we all would like to see that needle move a long ways from where it is now and put this to rest.
Okay.
To put it simply, the commission has exhausted their resources on essentially getting an answer to this issue, and now we'll be leaning on the city to help move that along.
Yep. Okay, I'm sorry, I got off track on that one on you. So we have a motion and a second to adopt the report. Is there any other discussion? 4 is no. That was the referral. So it wasn't, that's where I apologize. I kind of got off topic on you. Mr. Rayo. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Evans, or Mr. Pollack, I think you were talking about. It was $3,000, I think school district's gonna pay, school district was gonna pay half and the city was gonna pay half. Yeah.
I guess it'd be an upgrade to what's there. But, and I guess what takes place is the kids must walk, I assume walk across the fields, through the snow and whatever, I guess, to get to the school, if that's what it is. And I know there's a crunch for money everywhere, but it's, that's another one of those things where we went so far on Washington Street with the safe routes to school, with the sidewalks on both sides, and then we had sidewalks on 28th Street, but we didn't go further than that. And that's where all these apartments were getting built, were built. And now there are apartments built on 32nd to the south of Washington Street. And the only apartments up there that were made to put the sidewalks in was, I think they were the first ones that went in, I think. And those are the, I can't think of the name of them right now, and I thought I wrote it down even, because I went by there a number of times back and forth even this afternoon looking at it. But it's another one of them cases where I don't know what the number is, how many kids attend the school. My kids went there. But it's a long, and they went there before the safe routes to school got put in on Washington. So it was a great improvement with that. But as we've added these apartments, you know, and then the school there, that we're not having the sidewalks put in. And then we look at a mid-block crossing. Obviously, this would be an improvement for what's there. But yet again, hopefully, I guess as we continue down the road, whoever's sitting here, that as these places are built and whatever, that we do look at having the sidewalks put in. And for sure when they're within school areas and that. And obviously school, it's tax money, it's our tax money too. But it's, again, as I said, mid-block crossing gets them to walk across the field. Which I guess if the weather is fine and whatever, that's fine and dandy. But as the snow piles up, and as the plow goes by on 32nd Street, they got to crawl over the snowbank, I would assume, to even get across the, get into the schoolyard. So it's just, it's one of these things that there's a step made, but it's, I just think there's a further way to take care of the problem. And here again, we got a mid-block crossing yet on the other street corners. 28th and Washington, that at least they used to have, was crossing guards. This doesn't, to my knowledge. It's relying on the cross signal there. So I will support this, but I just think this is one that, and it probably won't, but I wish would more looking at would be done, because it's one of those places where I think a case sure could be made for sidewalks to be installed for the safety of all our kids, for the safety actually of those people, for the people attending soccer matches there. I think that could be made fairly easily, but it does cost money. But I'm not going to vote against this little bit of an upgrade, but I think there's a lot more to look at that could be done. With that, I do have a question on number 5. What's the size of that roundabout? Does anybody here have that? And I guess the artwork that's being looked at, you know, I've been in different cities around, and there's roundabouts where actually you have sidewalks that go through the roundabout. And there's parks within the roundabout. And so let's just not get so this artwork becomes a distraction of what those are big roundabouts. Those aren't roundabouts like we have. I'm not against artwork in that and to make something look nice, but with these roundabouts, the main, and all roundabouts, is the make it so the traffic goes around. Not so the traffic's looking at the artwork and runs into something. So I guess that's my comment on that. And with that, I would like to hold out number 7. Thank you.
So everybody okay with that being held out? Number 7? Don't see any objections? Okay, so I guess we'll take roll call on the balance of the report. So the motion is to adopt the balance of the report, and I would think the ordinance is attached except for item 7. That motion carried 8 ayes, 0 nays. And number 7. Hold on. Or you can go ahead and talk.
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, it's a street that has been, I don't know how long, but has been for quite a while. 2 lanes, and there's a bike lane that's there. I guess I believe it was anyway, as the road was resurfaced not too long ago, the Charles didn't get marked back in, which I think were there for the bike lanes. But the original referral for this was to, and again, I'll just, to back up a second, 8th Street's the school crossing, one with a guard, or during the school year. But the request was to consider adding parking on the north side of Baker between 5th and 8th. Now, looking at the, I looked at the diagrams here, and I assume that's the, what would be taken into account is there would be a bike lane that's left. Is that what got left in there? Parking was put in left, or was put in on both sides in what was ended up being done. Are the bike lanes left at all?
Yes, if, yeah, if-
I'm looking at the, just so, what I'm looking at, I'm going by, I guess it'd be, there'd be traffic going each way. There'd be parking on each side in both ways. And that there'd be a bike lane going both ways that would be, the bike lane would be between the traffic and the parked cars. Correct?
because the street's wide enough, Mr. Eichstead said that. And if you look, Tom, on the ordinance, is not all the way to A Street, it's 75 feet west of A Street, so
Yeah.
we knew because of the park, or the crossing guards.
Yeah, thank you. I'll start with the south side. I don't know where, other than, sure, I guess you were involved with starting, or I'd not say starting, but who brought it to you or whatever, but on the south side, there's a business with a parking lot. Next to that is a church with a parking lot, between 5th and 7th. I don't know that they need the parking. I've never heard of that request. The next block from 7th to 8th, now, if there wasn't parking for 75 feet, that does take a big chunk of that next block off. So I think we're jumping and doing that. I don't know that, I don't know the reasoning for, I guess. Obviously, on the south side, there are some residential areas, houses. Years ago, we had an alderman that lived on one of those on 7th Street in Baker. And so there are some corner houses that would have parking on the corners. So it's just, and then there's people who like bike lanes, there's people who don't like bike lanes, and then to put the bike lanes between parked cars and the traffic, that makes it, to me, more uncomfortable getting out of a parked car. The bicycle might be going by on busy Baker Street. To me, it's just something that I think we should look at again. I don't personally see the at least need to do this so far. And like I said, some of those on the south side of the street have parking lots. So I think it's, I just think it's, what's there has stood the test of time. I guess more concerning to me is having people having their gardens and flower gardens that take up the boulevard and go out right up to the street, and then people are out in the street tending their gardens and flowers, and that makes it more unsafe to me. So, but anyway, I'm gonna. If anybody has anything else to say, I guess I may change my mind. As I held it out, I'm gonna vote no on that. So, thank you.
Ms. Evanson.
Sorry, thank you. Tom, you're right, the south side has some of the businesses, but the homeowners on the north side, I had been contacted by a couple of them. Because their driveways are very long and narrow, they didn't have, I mean, if people came to visit, they have no option to park on the street. And because of the way that the streets are, I mean, they'd have to go way up over on Baker or on A Street to park, or go all the way back down to where Bloody Run Street is. So, or they go to the parking lot by the courthouse. So there wasn't ample parking there. I know Mr. Eichstead wanted to review it to make sure it was safe, but he said because of the width of the road, there was no issue with that. And as far as the bike lane in between, Rapids is pretty behind with that, but most municipalities have the bike lanes going in between traffic. That's just the new norm, and most bikers are aware of that as well. But that's a little background. So, thank you.
So we have a motion by Mr. Delaney
Motion to
to,
approve 7.
thank you. So a motion, is there a second? And a second by Mr. Veneman. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. That motion carried, 7 ayes, 1 nay. Item C, Human Resource Committee meeting held July 12th. Mr. Bemke? I don't think there's any action items in this.
I don't think there are,
Okay.
but thank you. Human Resource Committee met Tuesday, July 12th at 1:30 PM. All members were present. Also present, Tim DeSorcy, Sarah Anderson, Ben Gaudreau, Todd Eckes, Derek Matikowski, Ryan Hartman, and Kerry Warrington. The meeting was called to order at 1:32 by Chairperson Bemke. Item number 2 were the HR updates. A was the CSS Police Chief update, and B was the current recruiting update. Updates were provided and no action was taken. Item number 3, there was a fire department presentation called Reducing Liability. The presentation was given by Chief Eckes, Battalion Chief Gaudreau, Lieutenant Matikowski. Questions were asked and answered, and again, no action was taken. Item number 4 was adjournment. Motion by Rayom, seconded by Delaney to adjourn. Motion carried 3-0. Meeting was adjourned at 2:48 PM. With that, I will submit for your approval the Human Resource Committee report.
So motion by Evanson, seconded by Rayom. I see no discussion. All in favor, please cast your ballots. Mr. Pollak? That motion carried 8 ayes, 0 nays. We're on to item D, Committee of the Whole of the Common Council meeting held July 14th. Mr. Veneman. Yep. You're fine.
This is a report of the Committee of the Whole meeting on the Common Council held on July 14th. Meeting of the Committee of the Whole of the Wisconsin Rapids Common Council was held in the council chambers at City Hall, 444 West Grand Avenue, via remote and video conferencing on Thursday, July 14th at 6 p.m. Public was invited. All alderpersons were present. Also present was Mayor Blazer, Jennifer Gossick, Tim DeSorcy, and Tyler Mickelson. Sue Schill appeared by video conference. Call to order. Common Council President Veneman called the meeting to order at 6 p.m. Preliminary discussion regarding the 2023 budget. The 2023 budget was taken, or was discussed, excuse me. No action was taken on the item, adjournment. And the meeting adjourned at 6:45. With that, I submit the report for approval.
So a motion by Evanson, second by Austin. Any discussion? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. Mr. Delaney? Thank you. That motion carried, 8 ayes, 0 nays. We're on to item 9, reports of other committees, commissions, and boards, department reports. And what are your wishes? So a motion by Bemke, seconded by Veneman. Any discussion? Oh, go ahead, Ms. Evans.
For number C, sorry.
Okay.
Did they not meet this month?
Correct.
No.
Okay. I didn't see I know I've been watching the meetings beforehand, and I thought the Park and Rec Commission, I'll have to look back in my notes, but I think it was April and May, had talked about having the coordinator work on demographics for the aquatic center. And I didn't see anything mentioned in the minutes there talking about that. I didn't see anything on the dog park that hasn't been talked about in many months. So I was just wondering what the status of all that is. The aquatic center is 1 month to go out, but we haven't learned of any revenues, expenditures, or anything like that. So I was just kind of confused why that wasn't. But I guess I could wait. I'll make that for referral.
Well, so they are collecting all that demographics
Yep.
information. They're just not doing a month. They'll give a end of the year summary, unless you want something in the meantime. But
Doesn't pay now. I just
Right.
thought as the month went, it would have been interesting to find out how much revenue we're making each month or an update on it, since it's one of our big money makers.
it's not a
One we
big
only
money
have.
maker.
Well, I know, but it's the only one we got. So
We probably make more in permit fees than we do at the aquatics. But I can ask, and I wish Jake would have been here still, but I can find out about and have him update you with the email if you want. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? That's fine. Please cast your ballots. That motion carried, 8 ayes, 0 nays. Any referrals submitted to you? Okay.
Mayor, if I may,
Yep, go ahead.
on referrals.
Okay.
I'm going to be trying to get it, I couldn't get it go through, but I do have one that's going to be similar to one that Public Works has already that they've been meeting on. And it has to do, I've been contacted by a resident to look at train whistles on the east side. So it'll have to do with, basically, I think, the same thing that's being looked at on the west side, but, with a different streets that are involved, Kingston,
Oh, yeah. Okay.
28th, 32nd,
Yep.
and such, so. I live in the area. To me personally, it's not a bother, but there are those that are bothered by it, so I want to, we'll be getting that into, that'll be looked at, like I said, to be the same type of thing, I think, as on the west side, so, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Delaney?
I just have a quick referral. I have, honestly, maybe Jennifer can help me out with this. I'd have a referral to remove or redact any contract or application signature page from public viewing. Just when I had first started here, I was surprised that everything that comes through here has the person's actual signature on it. Wondering if there's a way that we could redact it or just remove that page so that it's not out there.
I think that'd be a good question for Sue also. We
It
can
would
ask
be.
her. Yeah.
Signature page on what?
Any
Anything.
application
Oh.
that comes through or anything that, contracts or applications.
But it's public record.
Yeah.
That's part of the public record.
So you can't redact that before putting it in public record?
We'll talk to Sue. I think that's a good idea. I'll talk to Sue Schill about that.
All right, that's all. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Just want to, I'll get that information to you, Jennifer, but I know I have before, but many people have mentioned, again, the legislative meeting has not met in over probably close to, not, I don't want to say a full year, but I know I have referrals to them, but I hope they meet soon. But I'll get you the rest of the referrals.
Go ahead.
So we are trying to schedule a meeting. I don't know when is Sue back this week?
Thursday.
I believe she was trying to coordinate something for next week, so we'll keep you posted. Thank you.
Item 11, adjournment. So a motion and a second to adjourn. Please cast your ballots. Motion carried 8 ayes. We are adjourned.